Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Sabo from Salisbury Township PD in Pennsylvania. He has 30 years experience in emergency services and 25 years experience in law enforcement. I'm really looking forward to having him on the show. So welcome, Chief Sabo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate you inviting me, and this is going to be a great experience.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. So 30 years total, 25 you've spent in law enforcement, and then the other 5 years you spent in fire and EMS. How did you get started in this profession?
Well, 30 years ago, ironically, I was in high school, and there was a mandatory community service that you had to do for high school. And I was looking to see what I was going to do, and I ended up joining a volunteer ambulance station, and ultimately ambulance and fire. And throughout high school, I became certified as a first responder and EMT. And right after high school, went into paramedic school and became a paramedic, which I'm still a paramedic today as well. So I was in the fire service first and a paramedic. And I was too young to be a police officer at the time. I'm a second generation police officer. My dad was a police officer. Um, and ultimately I knew that's what I wanted to do, but at the same time I was too young. So I went the route of emergency services between the fire and EMS and took that route to start because of the mandatory community service. And then thought I was going to stay that path. And obviously I had different ideas and wanted to become a police officer. So that once I was of age and a couple years after that, I started that process.
Wow. What was it like being so young, developmentally? How was that like starting out in this career? I mean, obviously, you know that you see some really hard things and it's a stressful career path. How was that being so young?
Yeah, you look back on it, it's interesting because it's sort of like all I know. So
Hmm.
you look back and it's like, it was in the family. I had bits and pieces from my father that I would hear stories here and that. And then, 16 years old, when you go to an accident or a death scene or something, it certainly, I think, affects you. But at the same time, early on, I knew life and death. Not everyone survives things, and put you in a good mindset, I think, to be able to deal with it and understand that at times things don't go your way, other times they do. And certainly, I think what the ultimate goal of mine was the cliche helping people. I want to help people, but at the same time, I think, truly at that age and that mindset, that's where I was thinking, like, I want to do this job because I want to help people and ultimately have a successful career like, other people that I knew in my life.
Yeah. Do you think that having that like deep-seated why that like I really want to help people, that helped anchor you and ground you and kind of get you through some of the harder times in this career?
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of times I think it's the people you surround yourself with also.
Mm.
I'm very pro um, have life outside of work also because that's how people deal with things or cope with things sometimes. If you only have your inner circle and surrounded you with work, which isn't a bad thing, but there's ways you have to get away from work sometimes and do and think about other things and do other things. And I think you have to, as a mind and body, you have to have some rest at times and really focus on your true inner self instead of your job 100% of the time.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I just saw something recently that was talking about this 80-year study that was done, and the study was on happiness. And they were trying to figure out um, what is an indicator for happiness? Like, is there one specific thing that separates people who have a long and happy life versus people who don't? And the one thing that they found over this 80-year study was the indicator for someone to have a longer, happier life was their relationships. And it wasn't just relationships with their immediate family, it was that kind of outer circle that you were talking about. Do you have a community of fulfilling relationships within your family unit, but then kind of that outer circle of friends and family that you're nurturing as well. And I thought that that was incredibly interesting, especially when we start to talk about wellness as a whole and all of the different pillars of wellness. And we talk about home wellness or, family wellness and relationship wellness. And that is one of the key indicators for that longevity.
that it certainly makes sense. You look back and it's like 30 years ago, the platoon that I used to work with as a medic, we still hang out, we still talk, we still text each other. So I could see that because those lifelong relationships and bonds certainly, I think, go a long way and stay the course of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you notice any difference, working in the fire and EMS, like paramedic setting versus law enforcement as far as wellness? Like, were things done differently, or did you notice anything that was done like maybe better in one area than the other? I've had this conversation a few times, so I'm wondering if you have any perspective on, wellness and who's doing it better.
Well, the atmosphere is different between fire and EMS and police. Police officers are in their car, they're usually by themselves.
Hmm.
It's like a solo job. Yes, you're going on calls together, you're backing each other up, but for the EMS and fire community, you're in the stations together, you're cooking dinners together, you're having those the chats and downtime and everything. And you get it in law enforcement, but it's more you're isolated and you're on your own for most of the part of your shift, besides the calls. But I think in the EMS and fire world, when you have 6, 8, 10 guys in your station, or you're hanging out and you're, you know, cooking and talking over mealtime before calls come in or in between calls, it does. I think it's a better communication and mindset that you get with those brothers and sisters that you're working with because you're together all the time. And law enforcement, you don't really get that. Yes, I know who I'm working with on my shift. We have our 6 or 8 guys that we're constantly meeting up on calls, but you don't have that sit down together, work out together, eat at the dinner table together, share meals, as you do with the fire and EMS service.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that was one of the conversations that I've had a lot. It's like the power of being able to offload things and have that camaraderie and that communication and almost like a debrief. I think, sometimes people don't realize that by talking about some of these things, like you really are offloading it in certain ways, maybe not in like a structured official way, but after a call being like, wow, that was crazy, or like that was really hard, or that was really sad, and having those moments together as a team to kind of talk about it is almost like an unofficial peer support in a way, to be able to do that. And so that is something that I've heard a lot about the differences, and obviously it is what it is, like you on patrol, there's going to be one person on patrol on their own, but maybe how can you organizationally create an environment where people feel comfortable to talk about things could be a way to like kind of replicate that environment that the fire service has.
Yeah, we certainly embrace that. I after a critical incident, a call or a bad accident or something, I encourage the guys, go back to the firehouse, talk to the guys, hang out for a bit, like till the
Yeah.
next call comes in. That's perfectly fine. And like you said, it's a little bit of a debrief, joke around a bit, you talk a bit, talk about what happened or whatnot, or not at all, and just be with people that were there. And then, ultimately, I think that really increases mental well-being and wellness for everyone involved because, while we all have different positions and functions, we're all in the same line of work together with emergency services. That's why I lump it in a lot all the time and say all the time, emergency services, but it truly is. We're all in the same boat. I mean, we're going on the same calls together, and we all have different tasks at times, but at the same time, it's the same job, and we're having a lot of the same outcomes with issues that we may have in our lives because we're all seeing the same things that people usually don't see in their lifetime.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because, when I first started working in this wellness space, I didn't realize the um, maybe competitiveness or even sometimes divisiveness, between, fire and law enforcement. And, you go to these conferences and everyone's always making jokes and, they're like, what do cops and firefighters have in common, and you hear it both ways. Like they're like, everyone wants to be a cop or everyone wants to be a firefighter. And, it seems sometimes like there's like that little friction, but to have that reminder that like you guys are all in this together, I think is really important because it just, I think, creates more respect and teamwork for what you guys are doing together in the community.
And that's what it's about, teamwork, right? We can't get a task done unless we all disciplines can come together and do team and be a team. So Yeah, you're right. We're ruthless with each other half the time with between fire, EMS, and police. But like you said, it is a way to relieve some stress, joke about it. But at the same time, like I said, at the end of the day, we're all there for the same task, and we have to remember, be grounded, and remember why we're here. It's for the people, not ourselves or whatever else. We're there to serve the community and the citizens of our municipalities.
Yeah. As a leader, as someone who is the chief of an organization, what are some strategies that have helped you along the way to be able to offload some of that stress and to have a long and successful career, especially as we know the stress, kind of builds over time. And, from what my understanding, there's different levels of stress the higher you rise through the ranks. So, do you have anything that you have done that's helped you along the way?
Yeah, you always have to do something outside of work, and that's what I like to see when the officers or people that I work with, have outside engagement outside of work. That's what you really need. That's where I find it, at least. Fishing, outdoor sports, boating, anything that takes your mind off the job and just puts you in an environment that something that you like that's not work related and not related to whatever job function that we see over and over and over again. And that's my go-to. And I find myself hanging out with guys I used to work with, and basically a lot of times all we do is we go fishing, um, go to someone's cabin and just hang out, go to go to my house at the shore, like, and just chill, and like you said, it comes down to sometimes company. That's all it is. People that you're familiar with and that you trust from wherever in your life, but you can separate things, relax, and just sort of hit that reset button a little bit, so that when you are in that high stress situation or on shift or whatnot, you have the right frame of mind to work and do your job effectively. Because we can all come to work, but to do your job effectively, I think takes a little harder practice or concentration to do. So that's certainly something that I like to see when our guys are out doing things on their days off, that has nothing to do with this department, nothing to do with this municipality, and they're enjoying themselves, whatever that is that they find.
I really like that you added that like caveat of, yeah, like it's great if you're here, but like we want you to be effective. And what are those things that we can put in place, or what are those things that you can do personally to make sure that you're operating at the highest level that you can? And I think we're all guilty of that. I certainly am, where I'm like, I can do it. Put me in, coach, and like you're just running on fumes. You're so tired, you're burned out, or, you're stressed to the max, and you're not running on sleep, like the amount of sleep that you need, and you're not making the best decisions that you possibly can. And you're sitting here saying, like, I want to do it, put me in, I can do it. But to have that moment of like, hey, like, we want you here, but we want a better version of you. Like we want the best version of you that we possibly can. And sometimes that means taking a step back sometimes. Sometimes that means disconnecting. Sometimes that means taking a break and, prioritizing yourself and your wellness. So I really appreciate that you said like, hey, it's not just about like being here. It's about like being effective. And how can we put in place things professionally and personally that are going to help you to get there?
Absolutely. And over the years, I worked for organizations that you had to fight for days off, and you got denied days off, and then you go to work miserable because you want to be somewhere else, and you're like, well, I can't be there because I was denied. So we try very hard to accommodate our officers by approving whatever requests that they have and backfilling their shifts and whatnot, so that they do get that time off. So very rare, and I'll never say never, but very rare do we not accommodate officers' requests, like when they put in for days off, because in my mind, that's going to make them a better officer when they come back to work. Because ultimately, if you're happy at work, you're going to be a happy employee, and that's what we ultimately at the end of the day want. Because we're going to serve our community better if you're enjoying your job and have the faith in your department and or municipality or leadership to say, okay, listen, I knew I needed a couple of days off. I put in for it, and it was approved immediately, even though we were a little short. But you know, again, I'd rather have someone come to work ready to work than just be a body in a car, and then what's going to come after that.
Right. Well, and you mentioned, you said like that little comment of, back in the day, we were always trying to get time off and it wasn't approved. And, I've had a lot of conversations about what wellness looked like, when you were coming up. And the conversation was so different than it is today. And I know you shared some personal stories with me about some of the things that you've seen throughout your career and maybe some of the pivotal moments that happened for you to really start prioritizing wellness within your organization. And I was hoping that you'd be willing to share with us today.
Yeah, you look back over the years, and when I first came on to emergency services, whether a paramedic, the fire end of it, or police, there really wasn't much in place. You had the critical incident teams for the major incidents, but it was something that wasn't really talked about. You sort of dealt with yourself, and over the years, you have people, colleagues that you work with. I've known several people committed suicide throughout their career or right after their career when they were done, and you start to think like, all right, this is a career, but you still have to have a life. And after the career, what do you do? So there has to be multiple phases of this. That yes, I'm gonna do what I want to do because I love it. Secondly, do my entire career, and thirdly, when it's over, you have that purpose. So I think the struggle is there for a lot of people that when it's over, maybe the purpose end of it, and that's something that I think part of our wellness plan, we include retirees and also family members because it's just as important as your officer. And one day we're all going to be retired or on to the next phase, and we're going to have a purpose. So
Yeah.
that's I think our plan for that is at least include everyone because ultimately at the end of the day that they are us. Just because they retired, they're still someone that was working for our municipality and they're part of our team.
Yeah.
And I say back in the day and I look at myself and I'm like, where did the last 30 years go? It's like, holy crap, I don't feel old, but at the same time, 30 years has gone and flown by. And, whatever we can do to offer services and make the employee better, happy, and a good employee, and to look out for that person and their family, I think is what we're the ultimate end goal, so that we all can have happiness, like you said, even after work. We always look up for retirement. Can't wait to retire. Yeah, yeah, can't wait to retire. And then the retirement comes, and if you don't have a plan or a goal or an end game or a purpose, a lot of times you see, unfortunately, former officers take their life or other issues that come into play.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you said, I don't feel old, but like 30 years pass by so fast. And I've had those moments recently. And I think everything's perspective, as you get older, like you start to realize like, man, maybe I didn't enjoy the moment as much as I could have. Maybe I was looking forward to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and not really like, looking around in that old, adage of like smelling the roses and, and really trying to like be grateful for what's happening right now. And I've started to really understand that there's a mortality to this thing. And of course, like you said, growing up in this industry, you really understood that early on that, we're not going to be here forever. And what we do is valuable, whether that's the contribution that you do professionally or the contribution that you have within your family. Like everyone who's listening to this has value in this world and in other people's lives. And I think that sometimes we attach our value to one particular thing. And I've done this where I've attached all of my value into my career as well. And I've lost those careers or I've lost opportunities. And you are kind of stuck with this like, well, who am I outside of that? And was I even valuable at all? And you're kind of in this, at least for me, like this kind of crisis of like, not knowing what to do. And I've had a lot of conversations with retirees in the public safety profession who have said really similar things of, I dedicated 30 plus years of my life and then the door closed and my key card didn't work anymore and no one called me. And I just felt completely alone and stranded. And so I really love that you are recognizing that and that you are extending resources to retirees because I think that people still want to feel like they're a part of it, even if they're retired, even if they're not active anymore. And it helps with that transition. But I also know that in our conversation offline, you really talked about the importance of proactive efforts and proactive wellness and really trying to prepare people for the future. And I think that preparing early on for retirement is a piece of that. You know, how can you prepare physically and mentally for what's coming? And you had mentioned a lot of things that you guys are doing organizationally. And I was hoping that maybe you could give us some insights into how you even got started with building out a wellness program, because a lot of people struggle with that. Like, how did you decide what to do? What was kind of like that first step? How did you fund it? You know, all of these things that I know a lot of leaders are asking who are listening to this, who are also kind of in that same infancy stage of building out a program.
Yeah, so all of us have employee assistance programs, but they're reactive. They're, so and so had an issue, and I'm going to send you to this because you have been failing at your employment skills, and we're going to send you this for correction. And you do that several times, and you're thinking this isn't solving the problem. This is sending someone to hopefully save them before it's too late. So we had a little bit of a think tank where one of my lieutenants came to me and a couple of the guys and said, "Hey, let's try and change the culture a little bit, because you know how that is trying to change police culture or even in emergency services, because like it's very hard." But at the same time, when people approach me and want these ideas, I'm like, great, let's get some information together. Let's see how we can do this and what we can do to improve. And they're like, all right, we're looking at changing the culture a little bit, but we also want to be proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah.
So I say, good. And here's my thing. People come to me all the time and like, hey, I have this problem. I'm like, okay, what's the solution? Because if you have a problem, you have to find a solution too. So they came back to me, specifically my lieutenant, and said, hey, here's what I think we need to do. We have to do some different functions to be proactive, maybe do some peer-to-peer support, go on with some of these other programs that our county is offering, and jump on board with this. And but let's not just stop there. Let's include families, because we all know that divorce rate is high in law enforcement. There's family issues all the time. Let's do financial stuff, because finances may be an issue with people, retirement, anything like that. So we searched around, got as much information as we could, and made an informed decision on, all right, here's the basis. Let's start from here. And then um, it's my job to sell it to our elected officials or our bosses that supply the funding. And to be honest with you, it really, to start a program, it's very cost effective. And a lot of the times where the employee assistance money or your benefits are coming from, you can finagle some of those funds to actually help pay for some of it. So our municipality and our elected officials, like, let's do this. And you know what? We already pay for insurance. We already pay for an employee assistance. So don't worry about the money. We're going to take care of this. Sign up for whatever you need to sign up for. And it's only going to make our municipality better, our employees better, because they're going to be well. Um, so we even went into the nutrition aspect of it. So we have different um, apps that we can use, and also plans that you watch little videos here and there, but it covers the whole spectrum of mental wellness, home life, financial wellness, nutrition, because we all know in law enforcement or emergency services our nutrition is horrible.
Mhm.
So yeah. So and we really got buy-in, like, and I think the officers that came to me with this and um, started this and did the research really are strongly opinionated about this, because it was their idea and their path that they wanted to go, and I'll certainly support them, because I think it's a great step that we're doing that was not available to us a long time ago.
Yeah. You say that you had buy-in, and that is one of the things that I hear all the time is buy-in. You know, how do we get buy-in? How do we break the stigma so that people actually utilize these resources and they don't sit there collecting dust? Do you think that you were able to get that buy-in and start, building that culture and breaking the stigma because it was led by your team, or do you have any strategies that can help to maybe answer that question, or the secret sauce to breaking stigma and creating buy-in?
Yeah, I don't know if you ever get 100% buy-in. And I'm sure there's people in my department that don't even never even opened up any of the resources that we gave them. But one of the things that we started with, first of all, is when you log into the app that we use, it's the same login for the entire department. So they don't know who's logging. We do not know who's logging it. It's one username, one login for everyone. So it's anonymous for the app part of it and all the resources. There's different things that we can do if you need peer-to-peer support, if you can touch different buttons and then you can call and identify yourself or whatnot. But um, I think that the best sell was that this is anonymous. You don't have to participate if you don't want, but at the same time, I think it's great because it is anonymous, and those officers that may not have reached out because they didn't want their name or the stigma attached to them have those resources, and no one knows who's actually accessing what on the app. And I think that's when, and it doesn't have to be an app; it could be any of the resources. I think that's the key is to break down the barriers and at least to get that out there. To That was one of the things for our department was if it's anonymous, it seemed like there was more buy-in because you never know when someone wants to use it and it could save a life. And if it saves one person's life, it's certainly well worth the cost of whatever it is.
100%. And, I think too, what you said is it might not be now that someone uses it. It might be a year from now, it might be 2 weeks from now, but having the resources available. So if and when someone does decide, because I think that sometimes we speak in like finalities, it's like, well, and I'm guilty of this too. It's like, well, this person won't use it. They might not use it now, but that's not to say that
Mhm.
like in 6 months there might be something that happens to them professionally or personally that they then say, you know what? I am going to reach for that. And they know that it's there and it's available. And so I think that's the beauty of it too, is when you have these resources in place, you might not get everyone 100% of the time, every single day. But if and when someone does need it, especially when they're, in their hardest, like darkest times, it's there.
And I think the changing demographics of the department with age as well. We're almost to the point of aging out. And
Yeah.
I'm not to say that I'm old, but at the same time, it's coming that, and I see the younger officers coming on here. That ironically, the officers that I'm hiring now, I was already working here when they were born, which is crazy to think. But uh, they seem to communicate. I know everyone's the younger generation, all technology and their phones or whatnot, but they seem to seek help or communicate better than I think the older officers in our department or the older generation because I think they grew up around that. They know their resources
Hmm.
in school. They were given the resources for that. I think of them. It's like the age of my kids that they were given those resources, and if you grow up using those resources or at least know the outlets that you have, um, I think you can talk about it a little more. And I see with the debriefings and the critical incident stress debriefings that we do, the younger officers seem to go because
Mm.
I think that was how they were brought up in it. That's the culture that they were in. When the older staff and the older officers, it was just like, suck it up and off to the next one. And that's how we were. So I think anytime we can put something in place that offers an opportunity um, for anything, for wellness or health, it's great. And like you said, if you use it, great. If you don't use it, you don't have to. But 1 year from now, when you're tail spinning, that's there and they know where to go for it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so funny that you say that because it does happen so fast. Like when I started working in this space 8 years ago, I felt like I was kind of like one of the younger ones, like not like the youngest, but like I didn't feel like I was like the old girl in class, like, and when people called me ma'am, like I just really thought it was just, kind of like what you say, like yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And now I realize that they're saying it because I'm their elder. Like I am truly their elder. And you're seeing these tattoos, because everyone puts their birth year as like a tattoo. It's like a thing, I guess, and I saw this recruit the other day that had a birth year of like 2000 and something. And I was like, oh no, like I'm the old lady in class, but I agree with you. I think that generations are always going to change and be different, and they're going to want different things and they're going to value different things. But I also think that what the younger generation is growing up in now and what they're valuing is based on what leadership is doing right now too, which is different, right? The prioritization of wellness and the introduction of these resources that you have been doing and leaders across the country have been doing for the past, you know, 5 to 10 years is influencing what they're prioritizing now, and so it's just a shift, I think, in prioritization that is different than maybe it was back then.
which I think is a good thing. It's a good thing. And like anything we can do to help the younger generation move up through the ranks, and ultimately, one day they're going to be the leaders. Whatever we can do to help that, we certainly will.
100%. No, I definitely agree with you. I wanted to maybe dive into a couple of the things that you had mentioned before with some of the things that you guys are doing and the success that you found. So I know that you mentioned that you really focus on relationships and home wellness. What are some of those strategies that you guys have done to really, make it so that everyone within the organization understands the importance of home work balance and relationship health?
Well, I think one of the things that I've tried to do, and we touched a little bit, is, I always tell the guys, they're like, listen, like I'm having this problem, or I need this day off because X, Y, and Z with my family. And, I always say to them, family comes first. Do what you need to do so you can come back to work and be part of work. So something, and that doesn't cost any money. I mean, that's keeping your officer with a home work balance using their vacation time or whatever. That's easy because we can manage short that day, or we can backfill the shift if we have to. They have that time coming to them. And ultimately, I always say, if you deny people off, or you don't have them take care of the issues, you're going to have increased sick time. You're going to have other problems because it's going to take off anyway. So you can start as simple as um, the work home balance, and I'm very big on that. Family comes first. Take care of what you need to at home so you can come back to work and take care of us. In addition to that, in some of the apps and resources that we have, there's different games. It's a totality of it. There's different games you can play. There's different activities that you can actually do with your family, or your wife, and certainly something to think about, because um, divorce rate is high, broken homes are high in law enforcement, and it certainly uh, is a problem. And I think it's something that if we can at least correct that a tiny bit, or give the resources to maybe make that a little bit better, I think it might help. I don't have that situation. I mean, I've been married for 20 some odd years. My wife and I have been together for 30 some odd years, but I see it with other guys all the time, and gals, that this job really takes a toll on your home life balance. And my wife's in emergency services too, but in the hospital setting. So we sort of came from the same beginnings. So I think we sort of know and expect what was going to happen, like with call outs, shift work, all the crazy times that you're missing holidays and whatnot. But sometimes, you know, I think relationships are entered and that expectation's not there. And it really creates stress on families because of missing birthdays, missing a lot of things. I missed a lot of things with my wife and kids, but at the same time, you try and find that balance where, sometimes you're celebrating Christmas or Thanksgiving 3 days later. And just that's what it is. So um, certainly whatever options we have that we can give to them and resources, even if it's something as simple as activities and games on an app to do with their family, we'll certainly try. And if you don't try, you're not going to know if it works or not.
Yeah, I really like that actually. I think, and I have experience with all of it. I've been divorced, like I know what that's like. And I'm a really big advocate for maintaining a team mentality. And I think if you have the effort of like you said, the games and the activities and trying to keep that connectedness and that team mentality within the home, then that is beneficial. It's not to say that no one's ever going to get divorced ever again, but I really like that idea. I've actually never had anyone say that, like having little like games and activities that you can do at home with your spouse to try to maintain that connection even through shift work and having to miss holidays and things of that nature. So the other one I wanted to talk about was financial. This is something that's brought up a lot, and you know I always laugh because I've learned a lot over the last couple of years. And I was at a conference and everyone's like, yeah, don't buy the truck. Like if you're a new officer, just do not buy that Ford. I'm not a car person. Ford F-150. I don't know if that's what it is, but they're like, don't buy the truck. And everyone's laughing, and everyone's like, yeah, don't do that. And then I walk out into the parking lot and it was rows and rows and rows of white pickup trucks. And I was like, "Oh, this is a thing. This is actually like a real thing." And so from a financial perspective and a financial education perspective, what do you think are maybe like the top three things that a younger officer should either know or maybe like not do?
One of the first things I do when a new officer comes in is I sit down and say, listen, you're going to have a pension at the end of your career, which is great, but you have to live within your means. And also, I recommend other things that you can do. And whatever your municipality is, there's other plans. Like we have it's called 457. It's just like another retirement plan. But I always sit down and say, listen, take a small amount that you're never going to miss now out of your first paycheck and just put into this because at the end of their career you're going to be happy that you did this and it's going to grow over and over again. And that's one of the things I do. And I have probably about 4 or 5 officers now. They're like, oh my word, I checked my account the other day and you wouldn't believe how much money's in there and it's growing. And I'm like, exactly, you need to plan for your future. And I'm one of the cheapest people that I know, and my wife will say that, and everyone will say that. Up until last year, I was driving a 1997 pickup truck, and even now, when I got my new truck, it's a 2012. So, like, I upgraded, but at the same time, it's still 13 years old. But I have always been looking for my future, even from early beginning as a paramedic, saying, okay, what can I do to make sure that when I get to the end of my career, when I'm ready, that I can retire, and that's gonna be it. So
Yeah.
um, that's one of the first things I talk about. And then secondly, I joke around, and you're exactly right with these pickup trucks because you see them. I could look out in the parking lot right now and probably see about 5 of them. But we joke around about it. But at the same time, um, that topic does come up a lot. It's like and I'm not sure where that actually comes from, or the spending need, or I'm not sure the cavalierness, but it's a conversation that we have because when we hire people, we look at credit and during their background and the young officer coming on, most of them are either right out of college or out of the military, and um, they have nothing and they're going into this well-paying job that's a rewarding career. And I think that's one of the first things. It's like, and it may not just be the law enforcement aspect of it, but it's like, all right, I have a secure job now that pays well, for the most part, and you know what, I'm going to treat myself, and they
Yeah.
go out with a bang. But sometimes I see a lot of overspending and living beyond the means, and then overtime comes in, and someone's working way too much overtime, and it's conversations with a sidebar that I try and have with the officers. But at the same time, I truly believe that there is a tie to the well-being of an officer and also an emergency services and the job itself, that somewhere I'm not sure material things come into play, and I'm not really sure um, where that comes from, and also how to really adjust their mental attitude towards that.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, and I'm going to put a caveat to this because when I was in my early 20s, I was not the smartest. I didn't make the smartest decisions. I didn't know how to manage money. That was not something that like I was equipped with personally. I will say that one of the things I have always taken pride in is the fact that I have never been in debt. And I always had this mentality of living below your means because in my mind, I wanted freedom. And to me, if I was in debt or if I like had to work overtime to pay for this lifestyle that I couldn't afford, that was less freedom that I had. And so I think that my mentality was always around this idea of freedom. And there's the opposite of that, feeling stuck, feeling like tied down to something or you have to make these payments. And so I was always really grateful for that. And I laughed when you said that you were really cheap because I still to this day shop at Goodwill like full time. Like doesn't matter how much money I make or I've made in my life, like I'm always buying secondhand. I'm a big sustainability person, but I think that it's really smart to invest your money in things that matter to you. And that can be, like you said, your future. That could be your kids' future. Maybe that's going on vacations with your family and you're able to, save money for that instead of maybe some of these material things that give you that instant gratification, but then that fades over time. And now you feel like you're stuck to that one thing. And some of the richest people that I have ever met in my life drive 2012 cars and wear flip-flops. So, I think that sometimes we get in this mindset, especially as a society, that it's like the keeping up the Joneses, that we have to have these certain things for a certain status to like prove our worth in some way. And I will say that the most wealthy, successful people I have met are not flashy people. They're actually people that you wouldn't even think twice at a grocery store. And it's usually the people who are flashing, the Porsche and the Gucci loafers and all these things that are the people that have the least amount of money. And so I really like that you guys are prioritizing and having these conversations because I think if you don't know, you don't know, especially when you're younger. You don't really know like how to invest or how to save your money or what's important. And you're not maybe thinking about the future as much because you think you have so much time. And so I think having those conversations of how can you put your money into things that truly matter and are going to set you up for success is really good. That's my
Yeah, and it's funny because I
sidebar.
started real young with my kids. I started real young, and I would always say to them when they're like, "We need," I'm like, "Is that a want or a need?" And they're like, "Well, it's a want." I'm like, "Okay," and they're like, "But I don't really need it." So it's funny because I that transitions to my job here. 'Cause during budget time, I always ask everyone, "Hey, what do we need for the budget this year?" Blah blah blah, and they come in like, "Oh, this." I'm like, "Is that a want or is that a need?" And they're like, yeah, that's a want. So sometimes if you just stop and think, like, do I really need this or is it just a want? And um, just having those conversations, I joke about it when we're talking about budget time and everything, but at work, but that may transition to their actual life too. Like, you know what? I don't really need this. I just want this. So you know what? Maybe I'll save up for this and buy it later when I, actually have the savings for it or whatever. Because what you don't want to see is someone go in debt, like you said, over their head, and then they have to do things, and then what does that do for home life? What does that do for work life when they have to be here? They need the overtime. It's just not a good environment when you get to that point.
Well, it's a vicious cycle because now if you're working overtime, you're not with your family as much. And so it's putting more strain on the family dynamic because you
Mhm.
don't have the time to spend with them because you have to go to work to, work the overtime to pay for the truck. So I completely agree with you. And, I think that it's okay to buy things that you want sometimes. I don't think that you never ever have to buy things you want. I think sometimes we look for escapism though, and we look for that instant gratification to make ourselves feel better. And what I have recognized and one of my strategies with spending, and maybe this helps someone else, is I will wait. I won't buy it immediately. I'll sit here and I'll, have these conversations with myself of, okay, do I want it? Do I need it? Can we afford it? Can we not afford it? And then I'm gonna like not do it for a couple of weeks. I'm just gonna sit. And then usually when you come back to it, you're like, oh, I don't really care anymore, or I don't really feel like I need it anymore. So sometimes delaying gratification can help you make those decisions too. But my question for you is with everything that you're doing in wellness, all the different pillars, all the different resources. I know you said that you have to, quote unquote, sell it, to your boss and, the township to be able to make these things happen. What is the ROI? What is the return on investment for offering these things to your people?
I think a healthy workplace with thriving employees, that's the ultimate goal. Like we talked this entire time that if you have employees that are mentally well, financially well, and their home life is doing well, you're going to have great employees and they're
Yeah.
going to succeed. So, it filters down in life everything that you do, right? If you're happy at home, you're usually happy at work. If you're happy at work, then you're happy with other stuff that you do. So if you can find that balance somewhere, and that sometimes that's hard to find. There's days that I'm just like, oh my word, I can't be here anymore. You know, you have to find that balance. But at the same time, if you can find that, I think the value or return on investment is overwhelming because you're going to have employees that succeed at what they do. Ultimately, I always say when I leave here, I want to leave this a better place than when I found it. And I always say that to the guys because I'm hoping that all of them feel the same way in their career as well. And it just gives a little bit of motivation to do your job and not just do it well. And like I said, if you're not coming here mentally prepared, we're not doing our job well. And what's that doing for our residents in our community when we're not ready to engage them or go on calls or do what we need to do? So the return of investment, I think you have to look at it from multifaceted and multi angles, but at the same time, hell, you know, they always say, you know, happy wife, happy life. Well, same thing with in your job. If you have a happy employee, you're going to have a great return in your investment for the nominal cost that these programs to start up actually cost.
I love it. Thank you. My final question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? You know, maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Something that I would say was be kind, treat people the way you want to be treated, because in the long run, it pays off. I've had people I've arrested over the years that actually call me and thank me after the fact because we treated them with dignity and respect. And that's ultimately, I think, what we need to do to be successful in our careers, whether it's anything that you do, law enforcement, emergency services, or whatever. But if you treat people the way you would want to be treated, at the end of the day, you're going to have a long, successful career and look back on it and be proud of what you did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sabo, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on here and sharing your perspectives and the things that you're doing organizationally. I really appreciate it. And that's all I have for you. But if I missed anything, I'll let you have the floor.
No, I had great time today. I appreciate it, and I'm glad that you're doing programs to bring this and highlight the spotlight because we've had way too many officers and medics and firemen and emergency services personnel that have taken their lives or or lost a lot because of the job and what they do. So it's pleasing to see someone bringing this to light and actually inviting organizations to do this. So I applaud you and thank you for that as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And we'll definitely stay in touch. So thank you.
Thank you.